I think my husband is cheating with his half-sister. There are strange things in our family. My husband's half-sister behaves as if they are more friends than relatives. After an unusual gift and correspondence with emojis, I begin to suspect that everything may not be so simple between them. When I decide to figure it out, the innermost secrets from the past are revealed, which change everything. Her husband's parents divorced when he was 15, and the father-in-law married again when her husband was 17. My stepmother has a daughter, let's call her Jess, who was 16 years old at the time of marriage. They all lived together for a year and a half before my husband went to college, where we met in the first year. When we were sophomores, Jess started studying at the same institution. Her husband introduced her to our group of friends, and she quickly joined the company. The spouse and half-sister looked more like friends than siblings, obviously because their parents got married when both children were more or less adults. Sometimes they still addressed each other bro and sis. At that time, it seemed to me that Jess was flirting with her half-brother, but he never reciprocated, so I just brushed it off, accepted this behavior as part of her personality, and thought I was crazy, because it was impossible for anything to happen between them. Currently, we all live in our hometown and see each other quite often. Jess hasn't had a boyfriend for several years. She and my husband are still very close. During joint gatherings, including their parents, if the husband sits on the couch, the sister will definitely sit opposite. Sometimes she puts her head on his shoulder when he shows her a video on the phone. It always seemed strange to me, but I brushed it off. Of course, they are not bound by blood ties, but their relationship would still be taboo and perceived strangely, so I never allowed my suspicion to turn into full force. However, in the last 6 months, the situation has become more and more strange. My husband and I have birthdays in April with a difference of only a week, so for the last couple of years we just combined them and celebrated them at the same time. We invited friends and relatives, and usually we were given general gifts. But this year Jess gave her husband a separate gift, really expensive gaming headphones and watches. I'm fine. And she also gave him a postcard in which she wrote some long text. I couldn't read it while we were opening the gifts. And later, when I asked my husband what was written, he brushed me off and said that he must have accidentally thrown away the postcard along with the envelope. But the envelope with the rest of the things was still on the counter. They corresponded more and more, and she communicated with me less and less. Let me remind you that we have been friends for the last 5 years. Sometimes I see notifications about her messages on my husband's phone screen, and there are always emojis. This happens when he holds the phone in his hands. He quickly unlocks it, and I can't read what they're texting about. Jess is always busy if I ask to meet in private, but she will never refuse to come to see both of us. My husband began to go with her much more often. There are difficulties here, because she continues to live with her parents, so he just tells me that he is going to talk to his father for a while. But I think that my husband goes to his half-sister. We've had less sex lately. Neither he nor I have a high libido, but before it was an average of twice a week, and now to 3 times a month. I was pissed off by the situation at the family meeting on July 4th. We had a picnic by the pool at my father's house. In the pool, Jess was hanging on her husband's back all the time as if he was rolling her, spraying him, behaving very playfully, etc. I thought I was going crazy, that maybe after so many years there was really a brotherly and sisterly relationship between them, and she's just fooling around. However, I noticed that my half-sister stared at me viciously when my husband and I were close. Well, now to the worst part of all this. We came out of the pool and went into the house to change clothes. I was with my husband in his room. She broke in without knocking at the moment when we were changing clothes, asking if she could borrow my comb. The husband was completely naked. I was terrified and said something like, "Oh my God, you could knock before entering." Jess remained unperturbed and lazily covered her eyes, saying, "Anyway, her husband is almost like a brother to her." My husband was a little embarrassed, but not as much as expected. She left as if nothing had happened. Since then, Jess hardly talks to me, and I think about it all the time. Am I going crazy? I haven't told my husband anything yet because I'm afraid to unfairly accuse him of cheating with my half-sister. I need someone else to confirm my fears. A small update, thanks to everyone who answered. When I was writing the post, I was both hopeful and afraid of confirming my fears. I tried to control myself and behave normally in relation to my husband as much as possible. Tomorrow the spouse is going to his father, so he says, and I plan to report there and see what happens. Another small update, because I know that you guys are following. Not exactly an update, but yes, I was at my mother-in-law's house on Saturday. A lot has happened since then, and I haven't picked up my phone often. In the evening, when I have time, I will write a full update and tell you about everything that happened. Most likely, I will post a new post because it is difficult to follow the comments under this post. Be patient for a while I put my head in order. In general, I really went to my father-in-law's house that weekend because my husband said he was going to see him. When I arrived, there was only my husband's car on the driveway. I wasn't sure what to do. Call my father-in-law, husband, or do something else. There was no desire to play games, so I just went into the house. I heard the voices of my husband and Jess coming from the kitchen, sounding like they were screaming. Even now, I couldn't tell what they were talking about. I was on such adrenaline that when I approached them, it felt like the sound was turned off or something like that, and I really didn't hear what they were talking about. My husband noticed me. He looked very scared, like a deer in the headlights, and I could only squeeze out, "What's going on?" I stared at them for a couple of seconds, and then the hit or run reaction turned on, and since I'm a non-conflict person, I turned around and rushed to run. My husband rushed after me and dragged me to the guest room to talk. I asked again what was going on, why he and Jess behaved so strangely, and if he was cheating on me. The spouse was shocked at first, and then suddenly burst into tears. I've never seen him cry before. My husband said that he is not cheating, and that he needs to tell me something, but for this we need to leave and return home. At first I was against it and said that I needed to find out everything now, but he was in a state of nervous breakdown, begged me, and I agreed. We left his car there and drove away in mine. I was silent, and he was sobbing all the way and trying to pull himself together. When we got home and sat down in the living room, I asked again what was going on and said that my patience had run out. And my husband started diarrhea verbally. He said that when Jess was in the second year, he went to a party with his friends. At that time we were already dating. But I went home for the weekend to spend time with my family. He got very drunk. Friends left him for the sake of fuck. So Jess offered to spend the night at her couch. Our establishment had dormitories on the territory, but Jess had a private room because she was the headman. At some point, my husband woke up with his pants down and saw his stepsister from above. He said that he didn't understand what was going on then and that all he remembered was how he woke up and saw her. He woke up a few hours later, but she slept in her bed, so her husband returned to the dormitory. He didn't tell anyone about it. It took him a long time to realize what had happened, and he felt that he could not tell anyone because 1. He felt ashamed and embarrassment. 2. He did not think that anyone would believe him. 3. Did not want to be known as a guy who slept with his half-sister. 4. Was afraid of losing me. And 5. Worried about his father, that if he found out, it could ruin his new marriage. And his father was so happy with his stepmother. The spouse said that he mostly pretended that nothing had happened, even next to Jess, when we were hanging out together. He said that they didn't talk about what happened until a few years ago. After graduation, we got engaged. She sent her husband a message that she loves him, thinks about that night all the time, and why their parents met and got married, because otherwise they could be together, etc. Jess is naturally obsessed with her half-brother. To my shame, when he told me, I didn't know what to think and believe until I saw their correspondence. I asked if for this reason they corresponded all the time, why wouldn't he distance himself from her now that we graduated and got married? The spouse said that it started again about 6 months ago, as I wrote in the previous post, when we told the families that we wanted to have a baby. He had a screenshot of the message that Jess sent the next day, in which she wrote that he should not do it, that marriage is not a permanent phenomenon until a child appears. There is still a chance to honestly confess to the family and leave me. She still loves him, etc. He replied that he loves me and wants a family with me, that he never loved her in that sense, and does not want her to talk to him about it again. It was then that her behavior changed. Jess asked why he fucked her if he didn't love her. In fact, she began to blackmail what their family would think. I read as many messages as I could. She constantly wrote about what she thought about my spouse, wanted to see him, even wrote that he looked good when we were all together. Sometimes he ignored the messages, and sometimes he tried to move the conversation in a different direction. Sometimes he just told him to stop it. Then, when he told me that he was going to see his father, she begged him to come. Otherwise, she would tell everything to her mother. He agreed, but swore that nothing had happened, that one of the parents was at home most of the time, and they were all on the terrace or in the living room. That day, her husband came to tell her that he was tired of it all. She could tell her parents whatever she wanted, but he had enough. That's why they shouted at each other. I was sitting trying to digest all this. I couldn't say anything because I didn't expect such a thing. I asked why we had less sex so abruptly, in fact, only on fertile days, since we wanted a baby, and no other time. He replied that this situation discouraged his desire. My spouse did it only for me because I wanted a child. It took a long time before he accepted the fact that his half-sister had raped him and that it's persecution. I was crying. She betrayed me. I felt the deepest sympathy for him. I hugged my husband and we cried together. I said that he should tell his father we shouldn't cross paths with her, and it will be difficult to do it as long as Jess lives with her father-in-law. At first, the husband refused, worried that he would not be believed and did not want to ruin his father's life, because it is not a fact that after that the marriage with the stepmother will last. I replied that my husband should hope that his father would believe him, and I was also worried that after a quarrel with his brother Jess would panic and do something. The husband agreed to tell his father, but he wanted to do it alone. On the weekend, he met with his father, told everything, showed text messages, etc. Father believed him, but he, like me, was taken by surprise by the situation, and he had no words. This led to the fact that the mother-in-law told his stepmother and, despite the fact that she did not believe it, told Jess to get out of the house. She accused my husband of somehow forging messages that you can scroll up, down, and her daughter's number is attached to the contact. Jess went crazy, said that it was all not true, and that it was her half-brother who was chasing her. When her husband scared her by contacting the police to get a restraining order against her if she did not tell the truth, the half-sister, being in a state of breakdown, confessed everything. The stepmother is terrified, and the mother-in-law does not know if he will be able to forgive her for not believing him and blaming her stepson for everything. We are now at the stage when the family is on the verge of disintegration. Jess still lives there. Her father demands that she move out and gives her 2 weeks. Instead of throwing her out right now, he acts to try to establish a relationship with his stepmother. My husband and I talked a lot, trying to get through the situation. We stopped trying to have a baby until my husband undergoes therapy. He's still thinking about filing a police report on persecution. My heart aches for him, and I'm trying to accept that Jess, whom I've known for many years, could have done this. I was preparing for my husband cheating on me, but obviously not for that. I'm not sure if I'll write more updates, maybe if my husband decides to sue. I want to thank everyone who advised me to dig deeper, even though everything went so far. I don't want to think about what else could happen. My heart aches for him, and I'm trying to accept that Jess, whom I've known for many years, could have done this. I was preparing for my husband cheating on me, but obviously not for that. I'm not sure if I'll write more updates, maybe if my husband decides to sue. I want to thank everyone who advised me to dig deeper, even though everything went so far. I don't want to think about what else could happen. A few weeks after everything that happened passed in excitement and stress. My husband and I went through a difficult recovery process after the shock caused by Jess' actions and his past. He began to attend therapy to deal with the emotional consequences of rape and persecution. I was there trying to support him, but the harsh reality slowly took over our lives. The mother-in-law promised to establish relations with his stepmother, but these attempts often turned in refusals. Jess had her own defense mechanisms. She tried to manipulate the situation, shifting the blame to others. Talks about placing her in another house came to a dead end, as the father-in-law could not finally get rid of the guilt that his own daughter caused harm. As a result, the family was on the verge of breaking up. The father became closed. The stepmother was ashamed, and Jess continued to insist that everything that was happening was fiction and untrue. The tension between all the participants was only growing. My husband, meanwhile, also found himself in a difficult situation. Some familiar families, having learned about what had happened, began to discuss us, quickly turning personal grief into public condemnation. At work, the audience laughed at him, not knowing the whole truth, and he felt that he had to justify himself to them. In an effort to restore his reputation, he simultaneously experienced a deep pain that he could not show because the support in general was scattered. Over time, it became obvious that our relationship also requires serious analysis. Despite the fact that we became very close after the crisis, and I tried to be a support for my husband, the gap between us increased. Discussing the topics of intimate life and future children, his fears that he might face something similar again became an obstacle. We both haven't had enough experience to go back to trying to have a baby. Instead, we felt lonely. At times I caught myself thinking that I didn't know how to support him. Every "how are you?" seemed wrong. A few months after her father-in-law threw Jess away, her behavior began to change. She appealed to family and friends, trying to convince them of her innocence, even offering to see a psychologist who will help him understand this situation. Nevertheless, some family members began to keep their distance from her. In parallel with these situations, there were many messages threatening the disclosure of details and variable rumors about our nest of the present. The conflict was growing rapidly, affecting everyone around. In an instant, the realization of unreliability and instability came. I realized that the disease in the family will only lead to this until the truth comes out. One day, during the New Year's holidays, when the atmosphere was supposed to be warm, I was hit in the face when I saw a message from Jess with a threat. She put out her evidence that her mother-in-law set up the whole story to survive her from the family. It should have been later turned off the severity of her body. The consequences are going on in wide steps. The fear of leaving me, friends, no matter what happens, overshined my actions. For a long time, I lived with a depressed feeling, watching the districts want something new, and I'm torn between them, despite the fact that I know. But the decision came. I decided to contact my lawyer about what to do if it comes to very confusing accusations from Jess against her husband or his family. I became sure that we would have to defend ourselves before allowing dubious rumors to absorb our lives even more. Over time, the situation began to heat up. The outcome of intimacy and repression led to inevitable hysterics within family gatherings. Every attempt by Jess to convince others that she was a victim only confirmed that all this would encourage the disintegration of our friendship. Every time the reason for the dispute was her sharpness, everyone else just left, leaving me and my husband alone with hatred, alertness, and fear. During all this time, I thought about whether this new marriage suits me. Personally, it seems to me that everything turns into a pit of unfulfilled promises. Sleep became an increasingly difficult process when it carried an internal flow of repressions that did not allow it to pass. Mental sterility seemed to be the norm. I kept giving my husband what he was looking for in me, but these moments themselves are unlikely to ever come back, like a constantly playing movie without end. How could our whole life freeze in unresolved eternal questions? We could go ahead, however. Instead, we met an increase in the environment of pain. Accumulated anxieties exacerbated the conflict, and each conclusion only increased the sadness. And who could evaluate other resources in their complaints? The story of Jess and all our conflicts exacerbated the main social and ethical factors, as many did not understand the pain that his family suffered. I studied with a full understanding of life experience, but here I myself was looking for the answer to the question, could we one day get out of this circle, preserving our love? Or will we again find ourselves on the vast expanses of misunderstanding, chronic discontent, and lost faith in each other?